it has the potential, if you continue this type of format, that it could be the coolest book club ever. I don't even want to say spiritual, but it's more of like a mental help book way before that people were even talking about mental health in the culture as code.
Reflecting on this book kind of gives you the answer to that, right? If you want to be a legend, if you want to be remembered through the decades, then the answers are here, right? Like, it's not about the possessions, it's about the legacy that you leave behind.
Every generation for thousands of years has lived the same exact thing that you're living right now. We have the answers for you. The idea of philosophy and the idea of what it means to kind of to be a man, and that your life and your destiny is either in the hands of nature or the hands of the gods, all these different things, it still kind of rings true, but it's such a great way to try to put your life in perspective.
So we're here today, we're going to talk about Letters from a Stoic, written by the man that doesn't need a last name, Seneca. No, he does have a last name, but the man that's known by one name, it's Seneca.
I like it. He's like Cher before there was Cher.
Lucius Annaeus Seneca. Let's dive in.
Let's go.
What's up, Jeff? Welcome to the show, episode number 1.
I love it. Thank you very much. Number 1. I feel like number 1. I am very excited for what we're doing here. This is a cool concept. I don't think it's anything that I've seen really done in podcasts as a whole. I am JAParker, aka JAParker Art. That is my name that I moonlight by. Anybody that's checked me out, I am primarily working in the mini comic space, digital art. NFTs are the latest and greatest, but please check me out. It's all done through my iPad. I have been doing work since 2016, comics for kids, comics for adults, and all that fun stuff in between. But thank you for having me, brother.
I'm hoping that, people that listen to the show end up getting a good understanding of this book, but also a better understanding of it just by listening to some of our personal stories around it and our own experiences, and just with our character and kind of our life journeys, right? Like being able to kind of reference certain things in this book. I hope people will get something from it, and then maybe even pick up the book and choose to read it. But if you don't want to pick up the book and read it, at least you can feel good for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's it right there. You get that. You're gonna get that dopamine rush. What better way than from reading?
Yeah, especially from this man that was born around the time of Jesus Christ.
And this is a very interesting time where you had really nothing better to do than sit down with your fellow man or woman and share ideas. And of course, there was always a level of artistry going on and carpentry and these beautiful, incredible things that they were doing, but how cool is it that you could sit down and nobody was staring at their cell phone, and you sat there looking at someone eye to eye and discussed ideas, or maybe even challenged ideas, which led us to where we are today.
Well, I think that we do have that today, but unfortunately, I think a lot of the attention span has dwindled, and a lot of spontaneous type of reaction to things, and it's almost, it's kind of become just the way it is, right? Like everyone is clickbait happy. Everyone loves the headlines. It's very difficult to find someone that will, conversate and try to actually get the right material to make an adequate response,
And I think it's difficult right now too, unlike what we're going to discuss with Seneca. It's very difficult right now too for people to ascertain the truth, because a lot of times, to your point, there may be this really flashy, catchy title or the headline of an article, and maybe the important topics, or maybe the point of what they want to get to is in paragraph 8.
Letters from a Stoic is a book that was written by Seneca, which was a philosopher that practiced Stoicism. And he was born around the same time as Jesus Christ. He had a very interesting life. And the introduction to this book really, really paints a really good picture of like his progress towards his career, his health, his life. And I felt like the intro to this story alone was just like something to get you boom connected. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how this book is structured? So how would somebody pick up this book and read it?
my personal recommendation for Seneca's letters, because again, we use this analogy casually when we talk about this. This is not like reading, The Hobbit, where it's going to be a straight read through. I very much recommend for anyone that's going to pick this up, for anybody who is interested in some of the topics we're talking about today, I would probably say take the approach to read several letters. It could be one, it could be five at a time. And as these things begin to really, really take hold in your mind, then stop. I would say completely stop. Take the night, maybe go right to bed. Think about the things that you've read over and just embrace them. Embrace them in your day-to-day, your own personal philosophy, your mindset. Because I don't think you're going to get as much out of it if you said, oh, I can read this whole thing in one day. I think you would do a disservice to yourself and do a disservice to your friends and the people you talk to. Because I think you're inevitably going to find things, different gems within this book, and sit there and say, you know what, this is how I've been thinking this, I've been believing this, but I didn't quite know how to put words to it.
Absolutely. So this book, it has an introduction by the translator or the author or whoever wrote this, whoever translated this book, because this book was written in 4 AD or 37 AD or something like
Seneca
that.
was born in 4 BC.
4 BC. So this book was written, the original was written God knows when. So obviously this book has been translated, right? And Penguin, I think, did this one. Yeah, so this is Penguin. Penguin did this one, and what they did was they kind of took this obviously wasn't written in English. This was written in Greek.
Yeah, yep, ancient Greek.
Ancient Greek, right? So they translated this, and they kind of try to make it a little bit more relevant, right? And if today's, so it's readable, right? Like it's probably not. It's like the Bible, right? It's exactly like the Bible. Like this book stands the test of time as like the Bible.
Absolutely.
So besides the introduction here, you have the letters, and what Penguin has done as the publisher is they've selected. I don't know how many letters there are. They skip. It goes up to letter. I think there's like 140 letters. It comes up to a letter 123 in this book, but there's a lot of missing ones. Like you mentioned, they're missing letter 1.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's other ones that skip. So they skip a lot of letters. I think altogether you probably have, let me see, 4, 5, 6, probably have like 15, 20 letters in this book. I could be wrong. I didn't count them. But what I found to be very helpful was as I was reading these letters, apart from, you want to read this book with a flashcard or a notepad, and you really want to try to take away things that you like and either highlight them in the book, underline them, do something. But also what I found helpful personally, Jeff, is there's just so much to highlight and underline.
There's a lot. Yeah. I would almost make an argument that I could have sat there with the highlighter
and just highlighted the whole page, right?
Yeah, the book would have been blue.
Yeah. I mean, look at my book, right? Like,
yeah.
And I'm sure yours looks exactly the same. Like you have marks everywhere.
I agree. And one thing that I actually took from you, and I don't mean to toot your own horn, but you had said something early on when I started reading this one, and you had mentioned that you had been carrying the book around with you everywhere that you went. And I ended up getting to the habit, you can see I got my backpack here for work and, all that fun stuff. And I actually threw Seneca in, Letters from a Stoic, and started carrying it with me every day. And moments throughout the day or lunch breaks or things like this where I had some downtime, I found myself either rereading some of the letters or opening it back up. But, the wear and tear is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Lately, this thing's been at the gym with me at in the morning. I've been on the treadmill just... So I reread this again, right, for this show. It only took me about a week and a half to read it, which it's a very easy book. I mean, there's 230 pages. But the letters are very well, I don't know if it was in the original letters or in the publication, but the letters themselves are very, I think, all relative to a theme. Like you can kind of catch like a vibe of what he's trying to write in the letter. So like one thing that I did is like I have an index card here, right? And it's like letter 2, do one thing, do it well, don't jump around. I can't even read my own handwriting sometimes. And obviously that one was a little bit more verbose, right? Like I kind of mentioned a lot, but down here it's like letter 41, spiritual, God, divine. Letter 46, discipline and reading. Letter 48, friendship. Letter 54, death. So it's like, sometimes I put a little asterisk if something in that letter meant a lot to me. Yeah. But the way that I'm going to take this book for the rest of my life now, or at least while I remember it, right, is like if I come to a point in my life where I'm like, I need to I need something to help me get through this, or I could use some wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna look at this index card and I'm gonna be like, all right, where should I go? Like, and this is kind of like a navigational guide, right? It's
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
because you don't really get it in the book. So I thought that was like a really cool way to read the book.
And it's also not fair for you to sit there, or anyone really, to say, okay, we need you to memorize every single letter, every single page, and every word. And I just think, as far as Stoicism and philosophy goes, not every single thing is going to sit there and ignite that spark in your mind. But if you have that flashcard, as you had mentioned, or if you have that, whatever tool you decide to use, I mean, it could be your notes section in your phone, anywhere that you can sit there and jot down those specific pieces that Seneca mentions that really rings true to you, then that for me is probably the best approach for this book as a whole.
Yeah, and those things that ring true to you will always change.
You're right, and I think that was, we talk about the social media type algorithms. That this book probably would never have been presented to me 2 years ago, 5 years ago. It kind of came at the very perfect time in our culture and in society. I think it was, hey, we're all, I don't want to say getting older, right? But we're all, we're not teenagers anymore, but we're all getting to the point where we're thinking more long term. We're thinking about how can we be better for not only the planet, but for the culture, society as a whole, in our day-to-day interactions, our family interactions. And I think that having the world slow down a little bit, this was the perfect time to have Letters from a Stoic right there in the forefront of our minds and on our reading list.
Yeah, I'm glad it came across your desk and you picked it up and we could have this conversation, man. Like, it's really awesome.
Yeah, I think, there are probably very few other books that I would say in this time period, maybe other than the Bible, right? But there are probably very few other books in this time period that I would say this is a must read, because you're absolutely going to pull things out of it that will change your perspective for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. So Seneca himself was a beast, right? Like this man, he went through so much. He traveled the world. He was kicked out of his country, placed on an island by himself.
Yeah.
He molested the emperor. He slept with the emperor's mom.
Filthy rich.
Filthy rich.
Had horrible seasickness and dove off of a ship and
He
said,
did
"You know
do
what?
that.
If you're not going to pull over, I'm going."
No, he was a straight beast. And he also lived this life where he would come. He really focused on philosophy, and he really would try to teach and provide his wisdom at his later parts in life to this guy Lucilius.
Yeah, Lucilius.
Lucilius.
And you're right. I think, all joking aside, it really was like a compendium of his life to say, like, okay, here's everything that I've learned up until this moment. I have to get it down now and show you, in terms of Stoicism and the philosophy, here's everything that I've learned and everything that I want to pass on. And there were multiple schools, like we talk about universities or colleges. That's what philosophy was then, right? It was just a bunch of different schools of thought and different philosophers challenging ideas to each other. So it's kind of cool to see in this letter format him telling Lucilius, hey, here's everything I've learned until right now. Take it and put it in your own mental blender and make it a part of who you are.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's well said. And he came across as this man that maybe didn't necessarily do the right things in his life, right? Like he caught himself in a lot of trouble. I mean, he was punished to an island for maybe it wasn't his fault. Maybe the kings at the time were a little paranoid. However, he went through a lot and maybe didn't make the best decisions himself. I mean, he had multiple wives. He he did become filthy rich. At what expense, we don't know.
Yeah.
But he he really preached to this young man, like, really, your the friendships are very important. Don't be too much into material possessions.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of death. right? Like don't cry like there's so much that we can learn that we're going to talk about that we get through this book. But himself as Seneca, he was a very interesting guy.
And I think it's really, really important to, when you look at someone's art as a whole, and writing is very much someone's art form, it's important to separate the individual from the ideas behind it. And I don't think it's fair to lump everything in all together. And what I've read and everything that I've gathered from the book, whether I agree with Seneca in his personal choices and in his life, is I definitely don't. But I would say this, that the letters to Lucilius, there are a lot of things, as you mentioned, death included, that are serious life lessons that we should incorporate into our own mindset. And even the concepts of death and not running away from these things, and it's kind of all in the hands of nature, and it's all in the hands of the gods. We start our life from birth running towards death, and there's no way to avoid that piece of it. So I take lessons like that, and I take those kind of concepts as pieces that will become part of my moral fiber. And you have to separate that from whatever Lucilius did on his own, or I'm sorry, whatever Seneca did on his own. I'm not as interested in him as an individual as I am his writings.
Okay, that's interesting that you say that, because you, sir, are an artist.
Yes, thank you. And I would certainly say this, while I have made it a point, and I've made it part of my personal creed or lifestyle, whatever you will, the power of positivity and doing unto others, and certainly trying to hopefully make the world a better place in my very small way of comic strips or drawings, and hopefully making some people laugh. I would hope that if anyone is out there that is saying, well, maybe I don't like him as an individual, you can still separate the art from it. And that's the biggest piece. And this happens, we see this today with, we'll pick on J.K. Rowling, for example, right? Everybody loves Harry Potter. Maybe people disagree with her personal choices. I think where we really get stuck as a society is trying to meld the two, right? We try to say, like, you must be your art rather than your art standing on its own. And I think if we get to that point, we can appreciate more things in writing, like Seneca or a J.K. Rowling or things like that. We don't need to agree with these individuals, but we need to understand that the art is its own thing.
Okay. Yeah, and it's also like, if he didn't go through those things, maybe he wouldn't be so wise.
Well, that's actually a great point. I would say that, any of us, I mean, if you fell off your bike as a kid, it's probably in some way informed who you are today.
Yeah.
If you had a bad experience somewhere, or someone was rude to you and you thought, okay, well, I don't want to do that ever. I don't want to treat people like that ever. You probably wouldn't be who you are right now without it. If we all lived in this kind of perfect bubble and you never had catalysts to change who you are, then of course you certainly wouldn't be the person you are today. You would never have the experience to make you otherwise. You certainly would never have a mindset for Stoicism.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It would even probably be attractive to you.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, today, look at what we go through every single day. Men, women, children, everyone's bombarded with these different aspects of social media. If you Google something, hey, it's going to tell you need to buy this right now, where Stoicism tells us otherwise, to say, we're going minimal, right? Where you want to focus on less of your household furnishings and more on who you are as a person and what are your ideas.
Yeah. So there's just so much great stuff to pick up in these letters. Like one of the ones that I have right here just in front of me, I'm just going to read it. It's just, this is the kind of stuff that sticks out to me. And really what I found was and maybe it's just because, like, I didn't read this all in 1 or 2 sittings. Obviously I read it in like a week and a half, but the first several letters are my favorite. And then I have some at the end that are really nice. But in this letter 5, he says, I view with pleasure and approval the way you keep on at your studies and sacrifice everything to your single-minded efforts to make yourself every day a better man. And again, just to set the context here, right? This is Seneca writing a letter to Lucilius. And he says, I do not merely urge you to persevere in this, trying to become a better man every day. Yeah. I actually implore you to. Let me give you the one piece of advice. And I love this. Refrain from following the example of those who craving attention, not for their own improvement. By doing this, certain things which are calculated to give rise to comment on your appearance or way living generously. he says, avoid shabby attire, long hair, unkept beard, right? And basically, what he's saying here is, don't follow the crowd, right?
Yes.
Don't follow the crowd, but don't also be so exaggerated with things, right? And I think that's a very good society, like a good tip in anyone's life, right? It's like, don't follow the crowd because usually crowds are wrong,
Yes.
but also you don't have to be intentionally so against the grit with things to stick out. Because if you're doing it just for attention, you're probably on the wrong. Your motives are incorrect.
And you could very well end up hurting people that you never set out to do. You never, just because you're trying to stand out from the crowd, or you're just trying to ruffle someone's feathers.
Or you're just so into trying to get attention that you don't really care about. You're not really considering other people's feelings or them at all, right? It's strictly just about you. So I really love that quote on Seneca, and there's just so much on this in this letter here that I just have highlighted.
5 was definitely powerful. I did want to share this one. We were talking about mental health to a degree, and obviously anxiety is a massive thing for a lot of people that they struggle with. And I thought this was kind of interesting because this is way before we ever had these conversations. And Seneca says, wild animals run from the dangers they actually see, and once they've escaped them, worry no more. We, however, are tormented alike by what is past and what is to come. A number of our blessings do us harm, for memory brings back the agony of fear, while the foresight brings it on prematurely.
Wow.
So I that was something that I thought.
Which letter was that, Jeff? Sorry.
So that was actually out of letter number 5 as well.
Oh, that was letter 5 too.
And as you had said too, Seneca, maybe even unintentionally, I mean, he comes out of the gate pretty hot. These first kind of 10 letters, he's swinging for the fences.
Yeah.
And we're covering so many different topics that are way before their time. But I also almost wonder if the Stoics and philosophers in Seneca's time, did they already know this stuff and maybe we lost the knowledge along the way?
I think that the knowledge is still present in a lot of us. I feel like this is more so when I read this, and again, I'm not trying to stand on any soapbox here. I certainly am not a perfect, like I don't think I'm perfect. I don't try to be perfect, but I do love self-improvement, right? And that's kind of why I feel like that's why I am where I am, right? It's because I never, I try, right? I learn. I constantly am trying to pick something new. So I think a lot of this is actually just kind of like a strict reminder. And it's like, whoa, this was from back in the day. And a lot of this is about being good, right? Like he uses God, right? Uppercase G in this book. So he believes in the higher power. Right?
100%. Yes.
And God is about loving someone else, loving everyone else, right? Like having love for people. And I think like a lot of this here is a reminder. There's one part of this letter, in these letters, I don't know where it is right now. I would find it, but he writes about, hey, Lucilius, I found this article or this something, right, in this book, and I've actually went and I highlighted them for you. It's here, like I did the work for you. And it's in one of these beginning stories, and I just thought like that. For me, I was like, wow, that's great because that means that this man is so thoughtful that he's elderly and he's dealing with his own things. And granted that this whole letters could be fake, right? We don't know that.
Sure.
But however, just the thought of idea, like like that reminder, like let me do something nice for someone else, is just so powerful to me.
It's like Seneca's giving Lucilius the cheat codes for his life here. He's like, hey, and I think we've all felt that way, right? Is you talk to someone maybe younger than you, or starting out on their career path, for example. It's like the best thing that you can do is tell them what you wish you knew at that age, right? And it's on them to hopefully fight a fixed mindset and hopefully understand that in every single interaction and every single conversation, there's something to be learned. And if they can embrace that piece of it, hopefully just as Lucilius did, if he is a real or was a real individual, took the lessons that Seneca sent and embraced them in his life.
Yeah, too bad we couldn't go back in time and get a
hangout would be interesting.
I'll get a retrospective from Lucilius.
Yeah.
How did things work out 30 years later? He says here, one of my favorite things like one of the quotes that I love in this book is actually in letter 6, and it's on page 40 of the Penguin version, and I have underlined, asterisks, bolded, put parentheses around this. There's no enjoying the possession of anything valuable unless one has someone to share it with. That was one of my favorite parts of this book because that's just a reminder of why we go to work every day, why we invest, why we try so hard. Because at the end of the day, you can have everything you want. If you're lonely, and I've seen this firsthand, right? Like I have there's people that I know, people in my life that are they have all the money in the world, but they're in a bad place mentally.
Yeah.
What's the point?
And I want to show you one thing first because I do think that this is a topic that we should kind of continue on here. But it's amazing that you had picked this because and
Yeah.
for those of you listening in, obviously you can't see it, but I have literally the same exact sentence highlighted, and I think
That's
that
crazy.
this is going to be, extrapolated by infinitely more people who take the time to sit here and read this because I think we're all thinking the same exact thing, right? We all know the right thing to do. We all know the lessons that we want to live and that we want to learn. But you're right. It's if you don't have people to share in your life all the blessings and all the good things that you do have, then what is the point of it all? It's very much so the idea that you can't take it with you. So why wouldn't you want to share the love, right? Share the wealth, so to speak. And I think unfortunately there are a lot of people that they feel that greed and maybe there's a separate hole in their life or a kind of darkness there that they feel the need that if they can just fill it with money or keep throwing material possessions at it, that somehow that hole is going to go away. But it's a bottomless pit. And I think if you feel yourself and you feel yourself kind of falling into that horrible cycle, then this book is going to be one of those things that will help you break that cycle and maybe understand that you should behave differently or try a new path. If what you're doing, right, it's like the definition of stupidity. If you're doing the same thing over and over again and you're not getting an actual result, you have to flip the script. You have to do something different and assume everything you've done up until that point is completely wrong.
That's a great point, man. And it's like I think a lot of people might feel like or might have that thought in the back of their head, right? But they might be confused. They might not know like what's right, what's wrong. I don't know. Like do I care? Do I not care? Right? Should I keep going? Should I settle? Right? Should I? But I think this book or reflecting on this book kind of gives you the answer to that, right? If you want to be a legend, if you want to be remembered through the decades, then the answers are here, right? Like it's not about the possessions. It's about the legacy that you leave behind.
It is, yeah. I completely agree with you, and I think we should all be very very conscious of what we leave behind and how people think of us because our time, right, it's not infinite. So we're here for a very set portion of time, and I think I try to fight this in my own mindset because even making art, I'm like, okay, well, this is a way to try to live forever, not in a greedy or evil way, but it's a way much like Letters from a Stoic. This has existed long past Seneca's time with incredible lessons that are still here for all of us to use and appreciate.
Absolutely. Letter 15 talks about friendship. It brings up the term fair weather friendships, which I thought was a really interesting terms. But let me I have something I have highlighted here. Let me see. Blah blah blah. Let me see. With people taking it significant, the man who was unable to endure anything that goes badly for him instead of what we mean by it, the man who refuses to allow anything goes badly for him to affect him. So we're not. There's no context there. Hold on. There was a lot that I had highlighted here. I know this one was a lot about friendship.
I do have a good one from Letter 15 I would like to share with you.
Please.
So as we move on throughout the book, and obviously I don't want to do a book reading here for everyone because I want them to appreciate it themselves. My hopes are that what we can do is we can share some pieces that really resonated with us in the book. So if we jump to Letter 15, out of the gate here, Seneca says, "Our ancestors had a custom, observed right down as far as my own lifetime, of adding to the opening words of a letter. I trust this finds you as it leaves me in good health. We have a good reason to say, I trust this finds you in pursuit of wisdom."
I love that. I actually had that highlighted too, my man.
I believe it, and I think not only just the two of us, but I believe there are going to be a lot of people that are kind of hanging on to the same types of sentences. it's like this aha moment. They're sitting there going, wow, this is something spoken
Can you
long before our time.
can you read what that says right there in my handwriting on the side of that section? It's
Lit-
3 letters.
You literally have a wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of wows in this book.
And I think that even that is such a great way to capture these different sentences and paragraphs to sit there and reference later. Or who knows? I mean, maybe this is something you want to hand down to, your kids or your kids' kids and say, hey, this was a big eye opener for me, in my early 30s, and a point where I was getting into the quote unquote adulthood of my life, and when I was learning to be a man or a woman. And this is something that I wanted to use as a tool that I want to give to you. And I think, letter 15, it kind of continues that pace. There's just so much, and even the first quarter of this book, that really smashes it out of the park for me.
There's just so much in this book. You can really you think of a subject and you can find something related to it. Any sort of issue or challenge that you might have in your life right now, you could probably get some real solid advice from a very wise man that made a lot of money, that was very, very respectable, very influenceable. I mean, this man Seneca actually was an advisor to the emperor. That's how. Some people even think that he was the one pulling the strings, right? Like the emperor was just the face. This guy was the one running the show. So this guy was very influenceable. This guy was very smart. He was a very wise man, and you know what he loved to do? He loved to read. He loved to sit down with other people, chat, conversate, maybe disagree.
Yeah,
Right.
and this is not unlike how we even talk about politics to this day, right? It's, the president for the most part is a salesman, right? They're
Yeah.
selling the ideas, but, who is really sitting there, writing and mastering the ideas. And I think for Nero, Seneca was very much so the one spearheading where he wanted the country to go and where he wanted the culture to go.
How the government worked, essentially, right? Like he
Absolutely.
was part of the big Roman, the big growth of the Roman Empire. There's just so much different subjects in this book, right? Just some, anything from friendship, influence, aging, philosophy, fasting,
And
death.
And even, this is a great one too. Letter 16.
What page, sir?
So if you can move to 65.
Oh, 65. Yeah.
So letter 16 on page 65, there's kind of like a common saying, right, where it's like, don't keep up with the Joneses. And one of the great ones here, Seneca's way ahead of any of this, right? So they must have been living the same thing at this time as we were here.
That's just so funny that you say that, because that is something that that comes to my mind too as I'm going through these letters and I'm studying it and I'm trying to absorb it and see how it kind of can shape my day to day or relatable to me, right? It's like I get that same vibe. Like these guys really were dealing with the same thing that we are. Nothing has changed.
And we're not talking, 2 years ago,
Or
5
30
years
years ago. We're not even talking 30 years ago.
Yeah, and well within our, way past our grandparents' lifetime, right? What we're talking about is, it's like the same themes throughout human history is exactly what we're living right now. So either culturally, we're not sitting here pointing them out, saying, listen, every generation for thousands of years has lived the same exact thing that you're living right now. We have the answers for you. I think we need to be more conscious about that. Those are the types of things that I wish I knew as a kid growing up.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? If you're ever feeling like you're alone, or you're feeling like an outsider, you don't have the answers, like the answers are all like right here. It's already been written for 1,000 years, 2,000 years, whatever it ends up being. So, a good one, as we had mentioned, the keeping up with the Joneses, right? So Seneca says, whatever is well said by anyone belongs to me. Here is another saying, and now he's quoting Epicurus. Here's another saying of Epicurus. If you shape your life according to nature, you will never be poor. If according to other people's opinions, you will never be rich.
Absolutely.
And it's that idea of, if you're constantly looking to try to impress and keep everyone else happy, you're never going to be rich, because you will go completely poor trying to buy items, hoping that someone else cares. How many people are on the highway on 195 today, maybe driving a super expensive car that, maybe they shouldn't have, or maybe they don't need, or maybe they can or can't afford, in hopes that someone else looks over at them, when really everyone else on 195 or everyone else on that highway or that road, they don't really give a shit. They're driving their own car. Everyone is thinking that they are the main character in the story. And I think that that's a problem culturally that we have. Everyone is saying, I am the main character. Hopefully everyone is looking at me times 7 billion people. And that's kind of I think that's the problem behind it, right? It's everyone thinking the same thing. Everyone is trying to keep up with the Joneses. Seneca knew about this however long ago and was already warning Lucilius against it.
Right. And what's funny about that whole thing with being rich is he talks about in this book several times like similar types of quotes just like that, where he says if you if you always look at what you don't have, you'll always be poor. If you just accept what you have and try to live a more minimalistic life, you will always be rich.
Of course.
Because you can be rich being a slave. You can be rich being a gladiator. You can be rich being a servant, right? And so let me just make a point again that this man was a very wealthy man. He was wealthier than the emperor.
Of course.
And this was his feeling towards riches.
This is very much like in today's day and age. This is like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos coming out on Twitter tomorrow and saying, listen, money is not even close to being important. Like, these are the highest seats of power and the most financially wealthy individuals who could turn around and say, like, yeah, you know what, I got a megawatt and everything, or mega yacht rather, and everything else is badass. But you know what though? This is not what is important.
Yeah. Oh, I do think they do that though, right? Like, I think if you look at like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, they're not every day grinding for the dollar, right? They're grinding for a specific purpose, right? Elon Musk trying to make us multiplanetary. Jeff Bezos has always been about customer experience, and he just happened to have good technical people around him help build this crazy infrastructure and all these companies, but. That's the difference. Like, if you were to sit in a room with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, I don't think they would talk about money.
Yeah, I definitely, I certainly can see that for sure. I think that it is definitely that idea, because even a lot of the public appearances, or even, Elon Musk is great on Twitter between the memes and everything else under the sun. But you're right, it's not waving money around for the sake of waving money around.
Those guys waving money around don't have any money.
It's like, and I think that's exactly it. And I think that's what Seneca is kind of warning us about there in those passages. And I say keeping up with the Joneses, casually, but I think you're right. I think it's very much so saying you have to be comfortable in who you are and in what you have, and more importantly, the people around you and your message, rather than what you can flaunt.
Absolutely.
And these are the types of things I hope that we can take letters from a Stoic and continue to pass down generation after generation, because it's like the cheat codes are all here.
Seneca says here,
I want to look with you here too.
Yeah, I'm on page 226. I don't want to read the whole paragraph, so I'm trying to just see if I can cut this out. But it says, so if I'm in bed recovering from my fatigue. Oh, okay. So this letter right here, he's writing to Lucilius, right? And he just arrived at this place in Alba late at night. He says, I just arrived and nothing's ready. Nothing's done for me. And at this point, right, we already know enough about Seneca, but he's like this wealthy man.
Yes.
Right? So like
at this point in his life, for sure.
He's richer than the emperor, right? He was richer than Nero. That's why Nero wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
So this guy's a very successful, affluent man, has a lot of respect, very highly respectable man. So he shows up and there's no bread. His bed's not ready. His room is not ready. He shows up to the Marriott, and the room is not ready.
Straight baller like Seneca.
Straight, yeah. Seneca's here,
What's
right?
happening here?
And he says, so I'm in my bed recovering from my fatigue. I just showed up. I'm making the best of this slowness on the part of the cook and the baker by carrying on a conversation with myself on this very theme. Right. So he's acknowledging this self-upsetness, his self. I'm feeling like upset about something, and he says. Nothing is burdensome if taken lightly, and how nothing need arouse one's irritation so long as one doesn't make it bigger than it is by getting irritated.
It's huge too, and I think part of it is interesting. I'm almost jealous of Seneca's boy Lucilius there. His buddy that he's imparting all this kind of wisdom in letters, and obviously this is a time way before you could Google anything or social media. So, how great would it be if you had a mentor of sorts that was kind of spamming you these letters to tell you like, hey, this is our school of philosophy. This is everything that we figured. Here's what's important and here's what's not important. Because I imagine before this time, especially in ancient Greece, it's all just noise, right? Nobody knows what is legitimate, what's not legitimate, what are the things that are very important, whose God is real, whose God's not real. But it's kind of, he becomes almost a focal point for these kind of ideas and schools of thought. And to, like you had said, for somebody that rich and powerful, to be even more powerful than the emperor, and you're not taking an approach of, I'm going to hoard all this knowledge. He very much has the approach of, I want to impart it to other people.
Absolutely. And he is big on that. He is big on teaching and learning. In fact, I have a note here from Letter 108 that I made some notes here that learning and teaching, and I actually even gave this letter an asterisk. I thought there was a lot of good stuff in there. But maybe we can go back to that. Just real quick, though, on Lucilius. Did you get the feeling, A, that either Lucilius was not real, or B, Lucilius might have been his lover?
I didn't think about it that way, but that's kind of an interesting thought too, that how deep is the dynamic between the two. It's one thing to have friends, and it's another thing to be that passionate about who you're sending the information to. I definitely don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, because we know that in Seneca's life, he has had troubles with what do they call it? Paidesterry?
Yeah.
Paideresti, which I had to look that word up, and it means molesting a young boy.
So it's what we would call a pedo.
A pedo, yeah. I guess that word. I guess that derives from paideresti.
Like many other things.
It's on page 10. Do you know how to pronounce that word?
Many other things from ancient Greece. You're on 10.
Page 10 in the introduction. So I got that from that page, and I also got something on page 230. In letter, which letter was that? These Roman numerals are kind of tough to kind of navigate. But on page 10 down at the bottom, you see here, blah, 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 and the introduction of the emperor to page. So he fondled Nero, right? Because the emperor was Nero. Yeah. And to we'll edit that.
It's definitely pedophilia.
If we keep that. Yeah, that's what it was when I looked it up. It said molestation of a young man.
Yeah.
And then here at the end, Jeff, right, like one of the final letters that we have, I think altogether, right, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's like 140 letters
altogether,
something like that. But we only have a subset of them here, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And at the end here on page 230, like one of the last things he says, he goes, well, it's up for discussion, but what age is it proper to love young men?
Yeah.
He wrote that in the letter to Lucilius.
Almost making an argument for it. And it's funny that you say, too, like we have a subset of the letters, even going as far as starting off with letter 2. In the very beginning, page 33, we kick it off with letter 2. So I almost wonder how much is
what we're
left.
Missing.
What we're missing. Yeah, how much is beyond this, between responses and what things were cut out.
Well, that's one of the arguments that this book, that Lucilius doesn't actually exist. That this actually was almost like a way of writing at the time. So, he would write these types of journals or these types of letters, but in fact there was nobody else. It was strictly just to make this published. It was strictly just a way of journaling. Like this person was not real. He was not really writing these letters because there is no responses. There's no proof or letters back.
We have nothing. We have some faint dialogue in certain instances where Seneca will say, you dare question me on things like this.
Precisely,
but we don't have anything concrete to sit there and say, okay, well, what is actually happening? So I guess my question is this the original Fight Club? Is Lucilius his Tyler Durden?
Wow, that's amazing. It's funny because as I read this book, a lot of the letters as I'm reading it, I feel like there's a lot of do as I say, not as I do.
So I like that topic a lot, and one of the ones that I wanted to bring up to you was from letter number 2. And the passage basically says, you should be extending your stay among writers whose genius is unquestionable, deriving constant nourishment from them if you wish to gain anything from your reading that will find a lasting place in your mind. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. People who spend their whole life traveling abroad end up having plenty of places where they can find hospitality, but no real friendships.
I love that chapter. Yeah, I love that letter. It's
That's
one of
kind
the
of
most iconic ones.
it's funny because I think that there were very few things in the book that I was kind of torn between, where I really appreciated like the classic adage where if you chase two rabbits you won't catch either, and that it feels that way to me. But the other thing too that kind of throws me off a little bit is it's almost like Seneca is saying, don't look to other writers, don't look to other stories. And I almost can't imagine today saying, okay, well, I'm only going to follow, one writer's books or one specific school of thought. That was probably the only part of the story overall or the letters overall that I was a little torn in between. I get the argument, but I don't know if I necessarily totally agreed with that argument.
Yeah, I I think I understand, like the way I understood it was like sort of like don't, you know, I think he even says it in the letter, like if you have a bookshelf full of books, then like it's unnecessary,
Yeah.
right? Like if you haven't finished the book, don't buy another one.
Yeah.
And personally, I'm guilty of it, right? I buy books I very easily on Amazon, right? One swipe and I have a new book coming, and there's other books that I haven't read.
Yeah.
I actually recently discovered something where it was like I forgot exactly. I think I read it online. I think it might have been from James Clear. He
Yeah.
says, take your age minus like take the number 100 minus your age from it, and that's how many pages of a book you should try before you give up on it.
Okay,
And it's
that's
like
fair.
so if you're at 33, you read 77 pages of a book, and if you're into it, finish it. If didn't connect, because some writers you won't connect with. Some
Sure.
books are just too technical, they're too hard, or maybe it's just not the right type of contacts,
Yeah.
or just not not helping you for whatever reason.
Yeah,
And then you maybe shouldn't waste your time. Why force yourself to do something that you don't enjoy?
that's true too. And I would challenge everyone, if you, whether it be from hearing the podcast here or from having it the same way that I did in your social media algorithms, to say these are the top books you need to read right now to better yourself as an individual. I would probably say too, this is definitely one you want to use that theory, and you want to power through and read as many pages as humanly possible. Historical pieces, I think, can be a challenge. It's not as easy as a Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's not as easy as a 0 to 1, where a lot of the concepts are in today's world, so you can get them. But if you're willing to really read between the lines, so to speak, you can pull so much about, as we had said, your mental health, what it means to be a strong individual, what it means to have these types of passions and really focus on them. It's all in there if you're willing to spend the time. So I would certainly say, don't give up on page 10.
Yeah, don't give up page 10. So interesting that you bring it up. How to read this book. I discovered this book by actually watching Ryan Holiday on YouTube.
Okay,
All right, so Ryan Holiday is like a modern day Stoic,
sure.
right? That's how I kind of look at him. And he actually had a video on how to read this book and how to read, or was it how to read Meditations? I think it was how to read Meditation. So like this isn't a story, right? Like you don't read this front to back and see what's going on.
Yeah, it's not Harry Potter.
This is a collection of letters that a Stoic, a person that practices Stoicism, wrote, which we believe might be not really even true, right? These might just be self-published to be, kind of like, hey, I'm at the end of my life, I'm getting elderly, I'm gonna start to just write down how I feel because I've accomplished a lot in my life. Because he was very accomplished,
Of course, yeah.
and he said, I'm gonna write these publications, and that's what this book is. This book is a collection of these letters, and inside of these letters, you really get the letters from a Stoic is simply just this man's kind of brain dumps on paper, but to kind of nurture a young man, and we can use it today as a story to kind of help us guide our lives using these Stoic principles. So one of the things that what I found here interesting was like there was a good section in the introduction like about Stoicism, like what is Stoicism.
I think that's probably a really great point for everyone to understand the concepts behind it. I mean, Stoicism for me is very much that mindset of, it's obviously very philosophical. It's very much understanding our place, not only in the world, but the place that we have in interactions with each other, being very cautious of material possessions, making sure that people understand, there's even a passage about when someone comes in our home, they should be there to admire us rather than our belongings. And for me, I think that's probably the biggest piece of Stoicism that kind of resonated with me, is more of a minimalist lifestyle, more conscientious of the things that you say and the way that you carry yourself rather than trying to show off, because ultimately that's how you want to be remembered. Is if you and I die tomorrow, I could have $10 million in the bank and nobody's going to remember the $10 million that I had in the bank, but they're going to remember our interactions and the way that we did carry ourselves. That's for me really what I took from Stoicism as a philosophy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, man. And like I feel like there couldn't have been a better time to really be like like introduced and actually diving into this at this point, right? Just because what's going on in the world.
Well, that's huge too. And as I had mentioned with the social media algorithms, right? It almost felt like the book was pushed, and I can only speak for myself, but was pushed to me at the right time, right? It's everyone's either quarantined or everybody's sitting at home and making sure that they're social distancing and all that fun stuff. And it was more like reading couldn't have been a better way, other than for myself, drawing comics, but reading couldn't have been a better way to occupy my time. And it's interesting today because everything is so fast paced and everything is a data dump and instantaneous. It's interesting to now live in the last couple of years having to pump the brakes on everything, slow right down. Things for me don't feel as rapid fire because now it's okay. Hey, you're taking care of the things you need to, but then you're going home, you're being safe and taking care of your loved ones or whatever you got to do, given the climate. But what a perfect book for it, because at their time, they didn't have social media, they didn't have the technology that we have on our fingertips. Elon Musk has said this a bunch of times. We're basically cyborgs, and everything is constantly bombarding your brain. But at their time, really, all they had to do was to sit around and talk philosophy, right? Seneca writing these letters,
He's studying past philosophers.
Of
Like
course.
that was a big deal. He quotes a lot of philosophers in his stories, and that's also like part of what he sent to Lucilius too. It's like, hey, this guy said this,
Yeah.
and like maybe I don't agree with that. Maybe it's like this, or he puts his flavor on it too, and which makes this book even more interesting because you're even getting a step back to even like before Christ, right? Because
Exactly.
like
Yes.
it's pretty crazy.
Way back,
Like
and
you get
like
like
you
a
said,
big picture of things.
quoting not only what they said, but how did they incorporate it into their own schools of thought, into their own philosophy, and even going so much as to acknowledge that different philosophers, maybe they don't necessarily agree on everything, but Stoicism is the overall goal. So you can kind of pick and choose which things from which schools of thought maybe resonate with you the most, or ignite that spark, in your heart or in your mind that you want to really focus on. So I think it would be so interesting to really see these people almost debate each other, for lack of a better term, to say like, okay, well, how can we be the best Stoic that we can be?
Okay.
So it's kind of cool in that sense.
Definitely. How you pick up this book, how you decide that you want to let it become a part of your life, it really is up to you and how you absorb things. But basically, the way that you've done it, the way that I've done it, seems to be working. Jeff, letter 62, page 113. Let me see if I can jump there. This was really about death and friendship. Just so many great things in this.
And it starts getting heavy towards the end.
It starts to get heavy, a little harder to read. The letters get longer.
And later in Seneca's life, obviously, death becomes a big topic, and I love the concepts of not running away from death. We've been closing in on this from the moment of birth. So I love the concepts of death, where not to be grim, but in the sense of we've been approaching this since the moment of birth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Seneca is very, very vocal about that.
Right, and what he says is instead of being, don't worry about dying tomorrow, worry about living today, essentially, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, like in this, some of the things I really liked about this letter was, this letter was written to Lucilius after Lucilius' friend passed away. So, he's saying, hey man, I'm sorry to hear about your friend's death. So here's like some pep talk, right? Like, let me help you out, man. So on page 114, he says, when one has lost a friend, one's eyes should neither dry nor screaming. Tears, yes, there should be, but not lamentation. Essentially, and then it's a little lower in the page. It says, "In our tears, we are trying to find means of proving that we feel the loss. We are not being governed by our grief, but we're parading it. No one ever goes out into mourning for the benefit merely of himself. Oh, the miserable folly of it all! And there should be an element of ostentation in grief." A little lower, he says, "Are you proposing that to keep your friend's memory will be just as long as we grieve, essentially?" So, you know, he says in here later on in here, take your eyes off of yourself, right? Lower on the page, he says, your face will cease to be present. Your face will cease to be if it's present picture of sadness as soon as you take your eyes off of yourself. So essentially, stop worrying about yourself, stop crying. And later on in here, he says, listen, men don't cry, right? Like, it's somewhere in here, it says something like, act like a man, right? Like what he's essentially saying is, you lost a loved one, it sucks, right? Like page 116, you have buried someone you loved. Now look for someone to love. Because what's important in this world is not when that person is gone. What's important in this world is to love that person while they're still here.
Absolutely. And in that same letter, my favorite of all was, "Let us therefore go out and make the most of friends, since no one can tell how long we shall have the opportunity."
Exactly.
And it's really appreciating that moment with the individual. And while, my only criticism of Seneca is he seems to have a big problem with extended grief. And I understand the concept of, grieving too long ends up becoming like you're looking for attention. So I do understand where he's saying, it comes off a little harsh in the letters.
Yeah,
but
of course,
but
it's a very tough, difficult subject.
and it is. And for some people, they lose the loved one and they're never the same.
Never the
So
same.
I think there's a line being towed between appreciate the time that we have here with your friends.
Let it be an eye opener, because that's sadly the truth.
Love every moment. This podcast right here, right? This is going to be something we can look on for the rest of our lives, because we won't always have it. So we need to appreciate in that Stoic mindset what we're doing here.
Whatever can happen at any time can happen today. Let us reflect then, my dearest Lucilius, that we ourselves should not be long in reaching the place we mourn as having reached. Incredible. Incredible. If you can live by these words, your life will significantly change.
And I wonder how many people would be genuinely helped with grief in their life if they took the opportunity to read through this.
Well,
and as I mentioned, maybe not focusing too hard on Seneca's mindset of, rip the Band-Aid off and go through it, but more so the idea of the love and appreciation of our friends and loved ones in the time we have.
Exactly. Yeah, that's precisely it, Jeff. And you said it right. Like a lot, I think this book and this idea of Stoicism can be looked at in a negative light exactly for that idea, right? Like they look at it, oh, Stoics are just into themselves, they're heartless, they're cold, they don't care. But that's not what it is, right? No, what it is we're trying to make a community, right? Let me jump back to the beginning, right? Like what is Stoicism, right? What is Stoicism? It goes under a variety of names or descriptions, including we're all here for the divine reason, creative reason, nature, the spirit or purpose of the universe, destiny, a personal God, even by the way it constitutes to traditional religion, the gods. So he puts that, or the publisher put that here in quotes. So we don't know why that was there, if that was part of the original. It's a man's duties to live in conformity with the divine will, nature's laws, resigning himself completely and uncomplainingly to whatever faith may send him, right? Amor vitae, I think it's called. Or it's one of those Latin sayings where it's like, faith is what it is, right? Like, love your faith. Like, what happens today, it is what it is. Move forward with it.
Your cards are, in their view, already dealt. So to see the things that happen to you throughout life, and maybe the losses, the wins, to see it as anything else other than divine influence,
absolutely,
is wrong. And you need to view it as this is part of the experience that you were set out from birth.
If you can live any moment knowing that moment can be taken away from you and be content, you have won. You won. And it's so hard, but that is the secret to living a fulfilled and happy life. How often are we chasing money, stature, job role, or whatever, possessions? And when we get there, we just set ourselves up for the next goal. And then we're right back to that grind. We're right back to that mental defeat where it's like, I can't get there. I can't get there. And then you get there because inevitably it will happen. But when you do get there, and I hope that everyone does, I hope you get there,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
And I'm not saying not to challenge yourself. I'm not saying not to get there. But just remember that the journey is just as important as the destination.
And I think it is very much so all about the journey. And I would be willing to argue there are probably very many people on their deathbed that would say exactly that. I wish that I cherished the journey a little bit more. I wish that I took the time to sit there and appreciate the things I had in front of me. And maybe the money didn't matter, or maybe the items in their possession didn't really matter, but what mattered was the fond memories, the laughs, the interactions, the basic things of looking over at your loved one while they're sleeping. Those are the things that they sit there, and the idea of Stoicism is this is what you need to cherish and enjoy.
Well, I hope that, after you leave here today that you feel that way, right? And I hope tomorrow you feel that way. Because the way to keep it there, man, is that constant reminder. If you were to absorb this for 21 days, your life would be profoundly different. It's so hard to leave it's difficult to first come into this type of atmosphere and get into this positive mindset, right? But you can get there, especially if you have support, right? You listen to people like Jeff, listen to people like myself. It's easier to get there, right? I'm sure you're feeling really good listening to this right now. But the challenge is going to be later tonight or tomorrow. How are you going to get back to this feeling?
Well, and that's the hope. And I think that one thing that I had learned from you, ultimately carrying the book around with me and having it as a reference and a resource to sit there and look to for either the things that I highlighted or the pages that I folded over. And the book is a little beaten and some wear and tear, but obviously it's just because now we have this wealth of knowledge here from Seneca to sit there and say, you know what, I need to get that dopamine release. I need to chase that feeling again of get regrounded and learn those things all over again. Again, we don't expect anyone to memorize it, but have it as a tool, because again, like that gym membership analogy, as long as you have it there in your arsenal, then sky's the limit.
Absolutely. Perseverance is a big word, right? Perseverance, and he talks about that on letter 68, which starts on page 130. Just a couple quick excerpts that I really liked in this page. Page 134. Do not go out of your way to make your troubles any more tiresome than they are, and burden yourself with fretting. A man is as unhappy as he is convinced himself he is, and complaining away about one's sufferings after they are over. So don't complain, right? Try to find the positive in whatever you're doing, right? The torments and hardships I endured, right? No one thought I would recover, right? Seneca's writing to this guy. This guy dealt with a lot of health issues, right? He dealt with tuberculosis.
Yep.
He was on his deathbed. In fact, oftentimes in this book he talks a lot about his health issues, right? This man had tuberculosis. He dealt with a lot of health issues, and here he is telling him, hey, I could, even some excerpts, right? Like, hey, I couldn't breathe today, right? Like, I had trouble breathing, and now I'm feeling like I couldn't even walk. I had to like test myself just to get to the kitchen, but I did it, and now I'm here, I'm reading, I'm writing, and I'm persevering. And I think perseverance is a part that's how I think that persevering is very important, a good character trait.
And it's almost like Seneca is warning us in some ways about, what we know now is like the victim mindset, right? And the kind of approach of woe is me. And that's certainly not to say that people aren't going through serious issues. I mean, especially in the last couple of years. We people get tired of the we're all in it together kind of mindset, but that's certainly not what we're trying to say. People are dealing with some real stuff, but Seneca is warning us a long, long time ago that we need to be very, very careful with this mindset because it becomes a poison. And I think when you take the approach day in and day out that the world is out to get you, you'll never find that perseverance, and you'll never come up from feeling like you're in that black hole. And he's telling you right here that this is how you defeat it.
Yeah.
So again, there are so many different themes of positivity and positive mental health that he's giving us from long past his time.
It's unbelievable. It really is. It's so back in the day, and it's still so relevant. It's absolutely amazing. Whatever you, expect things, right? He says here at the end of this chapter, the end of this letter, the end of letter 68, whatever you have been expecting for some time, like be expecting it. So when it comes, it's less of a shock. Always be expecting the worst, right? Hope for the best, plan for the worst, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, oh, of
Like
course, yeah, yeah.
100%,
We do
right?
this in business all the time. You know, if you can plan for the worst and hope for the best,
Everyone wins.
everyone wins. Yeah, of course, because you know you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your team or the people that you look out for to make sure that they are certainly protected. And I think that that's kind of an interesting way. You know, it's like people in business a lot of times have the art of war sitting there on their bookshelf in their office, and I think maybe letters for a Stoic or letters from a Stoic should probably be something that is right there for the reading.
One of the letters that really touched me on this was letter 108 that starts on page 200. It's really about learning and teaching, which I think is so critical because I think once you really want to master something, you really want to like that. That only happens when you start to teach it, and I think that as you and I, and a lot of others, and the majority of the people that would be listening to this, they're in the same mindset as us, right? They're constantly learning. So everyone here, like I encourage you guys to do what you can to teach, right? Do what you can to inspire other people. And this actually is what he writes about in this letter to Lucilius. So he opens it up by saying, the subject you asked me about was one of those in which knowledge has no other justification than knowledge itself. I don't even know why I highlighted this, but I liked it. But a little further down the letter, he says, oh wow, I actually liked all of that all the way up to the next page. So I'm not going to read that whole thing. Just trust me, go read that chapter. You like it. But in this same letter, he says, the more the mind takes in, the more it expands. A person teaching and a person learning, he said, should never have the same end in view, the improvement of the latter. You mustn't take on more than we can manage. The poor lack much, the greedy everything. There's just so much great stuff in this letter. But essentially what he says here is go out and teach. Go out with your own intention to help someone else because that will help you. And to me personally, is one of the things that as I'm moving into this next sort of chapter in my life, is really what I'm focusing on. And that's why, we're creating this show. We're going out, we're doing a bunch of different things. Really, it's about really getting you, the person listening to this, pumped, feeling good, because I know that you're going to go out and do the same thing. And then that's how we make a better world.
I love that. And it's that sense of community, even in a digital space. It's getting people together to read some of the things that either we've found influential to help people out, make them better individuals, better leaders in society and day-to-day life. And it's really starting here with number one from Letters from a Stoic.
I love it, Jeff, and I think that's a great way to come to an end here, man. Like I think we've been at this for a little while, and it's been a really good time. And I loved hearing about your experiences and things that things that you liked in the story in the book. So, Jeff, hit me real quick. Top things that you really enjoyed about the book.
I gotta say, number one, honestly, the biggest influential piece or the biggest lesson that I was able to take from this is actually from letter number 3. I'm a big fan. The numbers rather, the numbers 3, 6, and 9 to manifest greatness. So from letter number 3, but if you are looking on anyone as a friend when you do not trust him as you trust yourself, you are making a grave mistake and have failed to grasp sufficiently the full force of true friendship. So ultimately, anyone that you look to as a friend, as a brother, a fellow Stoic, make sure that you're looking at them in that fashion and don't half-ass friendship. Don't have people in your circle or in your life that you wouldn't give blood for because ultimately they're not worth even having in your life. So have the people closest to you, people that you would die for, you want to teach, you want them to learn the lessons from this book. And that is the biggest thing that I've taken away from Letters from a Stoic. This was an awesome read.
Oh, powerful words, Jeff.
Powerful words, powerful book. Thank you so much for having me, brother. This was huge.
No problem, Jeff. It was great to have you, man.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Till next time.
Jeff, it was so great to have you here, man.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course, man. And I know everyone listening is really going to be inspired by you, and they're definitely going to want to connect with you. So if they want to get in touch with you, Jeff, how can they do it?
Absolutely. So Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at JAParker Art. Check out the work. Take a look. My links are all through Twitter and Instagram. Download some free comics. If you have anyone else there that needs something good to read. I try to put out as much stuff as I possibly can for free for people to enjoy. If you have, kids, if it makes sense, where they're sitting there and you can't afford a book or you can't do anything else, check out the work. Make sure you obviously proofread, do what you got to do. But JAParker Art, get on there, check it out. A lot of it's free, but I love you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
But that's okay.
No, hey, that's okay. I think this is kind of like the warm up.
Yeah, this is definitely the warm up. So
I like that.
Yeah, this is definitely the warm up.
Yeah.
Well, there was a thing in here. It was one of the most recent ones. It was something along the lines of like, don't let things bother you, right?
Yeah,
and that's like a big Stoic.
You're right. I think there's a lot of these kind of tenets of Stoicism and a lot of these schools of thought. You're right. Where this is a great example, right? And even who knows? Let's say it all gets cut hypothetically from the final version. But
yeah, totally. We just take pieces of it.
But what a great kind of concept. To your point of it's to take life kind of as it comes at you. A lot of this is so outside of our control. So it's like, why even stress about it? Why get angry about it?
Right.
How many other people are at home right now, right? And their kids running around having fun and they're trying to do some work. And hey, that's life.
That is life, right?
Yeah.
So
I love it. It's pure.
It's
raw.
absolutely pure. It's great.
Yeah.